No one's safe. We see ransomware attacks from kind of small medical offices up through multi-million dollar, billion-dollar companies.
We're getting on our iPads or our cell phones, phishing attempts all the time. It just seems sort of endless. How big of a problem does the FBI feel it is right now?
It's the worst day in a company's lifetime to have to decide to pay criminals or not to get back online. But even if you pay, there's no guarantee.
Cynthia Kaiser served for 2 decades with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, most recently as the Deputy Assistant Director for Cyber in the Cyber Division. She also served as an intelligence analyst for years at the FBI, including 2 stints as a President's Daily Briefer for 2 administrations. She's now the Senior Vice President at Halcyon. Today, we talk about the growing problem of ransomware, what it is, who's perpetrating it, and what victims can do to protect themselves. She also talks about what Halcyon and companies like it are doing to help protect us from this new internet scourge. Cynthia Kaiser, welcome to Intelligence at the Edge. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you're now a Senior Vice President with Halcyon, but you just left government after serving for a couple decades. You were the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI for Cyber. Tell us, how did you get your start with the FBI?
So I kind of applied on accident at the FBI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had one of those crises of, was I going to go to grad school or was I going to go into government and start work right away? And I applied. I was living abroad at the time and promptly forgot I applied. And then my parents called me and said, the FBI is calling us about you and we don't know why. It's like, oh, I do. And so I ended up getting off the plane.
It's a little disconcerting.
Yeah, I know, right? I ended up getting off the plane. 24 hours later, I was interviewing, and I entered in as an intelligence analyst into the FBI. And I had a great 2 decades career. I started off in counterintelligence. I spent a lot of the time in WMD, doing kind of missiles, nuclear weapon analysis, as a North Korea analyst normally does, right? But, around that 2014 time period, the cyber threats really started taking off. First on Korea, like you had North Koreans' attack of Sony, but then you had just all these different attacks start stacking up. I ended up as a President's Daily Briefing intelligence briefer at the tail end of the Obama administration and beginning of the first Trump administration. And in that time, there was a ton of cyber things going on. And I thought, that's all I want to do. I felt like it was the national security challenge of our lifetime. So I came back to the FBI and have been doing cyber threats ever since.
And why did you decide to leave for Halcyon? And what does Halcyon do?
So Halcyon's an anti-ransomware provider. Essentially at the FBI, what I was doing was working over all of the intelligence analysts, critical infrastructure engagement, and working on the policy matters. But it was always more after an incident. So think like something happens, we're going in, we're investigating, we're helping victims, and we're learning things that help prevent further attacks. Now I'm on the opposite side of that, and much more in the prevention space, where Halcyon has a lot of different tools, and they get to be part of that, hashtag stop ransomware effort a lot further on, from initial access through capturing keys while an attack's happening so you can decrypt in real time. So it's fun to have that switch, but still be on that same mission.
So you're focused now on ransomware. But first, I just want to ask your perspective on the overall cyber attack threat. It just seems that these days, every week, we're reading about some new major hack, or we're getting on our iPads or our cell phones, phishing attempts all the time. It just seems sort of endless. What explains this, and how big of a problem does the FBI feel it is right now?
So it's so interesting to have been doing this since that 2016, 2017 time period, because things that were just huge deals in 2017 are like a Tuesday now. And you almost kind of look at this, and sometimes I look at it with frustration, like we really have to be doing more, we have to be doing something, this is a big deal, but people have gotten so used to hearing about attack after attack after attack, it almost becomes white noise, or people don't know what to do. The scale of it's very large. Last year, the FBI has an Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's where people put in their reports of cybercrime or other kind of fraud cases. And they had reports of, I think, over 3,500 reports of ransomware attacks, about the same number of data breaches, and that's just two categories. And those are both increases from years prior, and it really shows just the threat's constantly increasing. It's constantly evolving because we've have a lot more, don't you have more devices than you did in 2017?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
It's a much more digital economy across the board.
Exactly. It is a virtualization of everything, and that means that there's more things to attack. And, on my side, ransomware, people see dollar signs, but on the nation state side, they see, espionage, gaining foreign policy advantages, or prepositioning for, future attack scenarios. And you put all that together, it's a lot. And most agencies, companies in the space, they're only looking through probably like a narrow window of what is likely going on just across the world.
So, ransomware, can you give us the technical definition?
Yes.
Because there are a lot of different cyber attacks, and this is one very important but narrow category. So what is ransomware?
So ransomware essentially locks up your computers, your network. They get in, they are able to encrypt, meaning locked up all your files. You can't access anything. Now, when ransomware got bigger, people started to realize, if I create these backups, I put them off site, I can get back online, I don't have to pay the ransom. So they got smarter in their extortion schemes. They now steal data as well and say, if you don't pay us, we won't unlock your network, but we also will leak your data in an effort to really get them to pay. So it's the core financially motivated cybercrime, a little different from where you might see China stealing trade secrets or Russia trying to get access to some documents to be able to leak them later. It's a little bit different, but I would say that with a little asterisk because it also is getting increasingly more difficult to tell the proxies and the criminal groups from the nation states. And we see nation states using ransomware sometimes to try to mask their actual activities. So, while it's a distinct thing, it's definitely a tool that's used by all the cyber threat actors that we see.
So this seems like a rather sophisticated form of attack. I mean, you have to be a ninja in the cyberspace. You then have to really know your targets pretty well, know what you're looking for. Tell us a little bit more about these perpetrators. Where do they come from? How are they organized? How do they learn what they do?
Yeah, most ransomware actors are from Russian-speaking countries. And we see them not just kind of take on, like, I am a hacker, I'm going to develop the malware up through, I'm going to deploy it. They've actually created this entire ecosystem, like an entire economy that's underground. Wow. So you have people who develop the malware, like technically gifted, people who grew up probably in these hacking scenes. But now they're really kind of divorced from a lot of the risk of the actual deployment. You have people called affiliates, and they will basically borrow the malware with permission and then deploy it against victims and then send a little bit of percentage back of what they earn to these developers. But it's not just these two. I have this very ugly link chart, which I think anyone in the intelligence community can really appreciate, right? Sometimes the affiliates, they're not the ones going out finding how to get in. There's these people called initial access brokers. They're just selling access to your network, your usernames, passwords, et cetera, out there on the dark web. You have money launderers. You have people who are helping host the infrastructure because you need to be able to hide who you are, right? So you have to, buy ways to obscure yourself out there. And so you go across and you find all these different people having different specialties that end in some of these more disastrous attacks.
And they're doing it at scale because it's working, or at least working enough. So tell us a little bit about the victims. Are they sort of exclusively rich, well-endowed companies and organizations? Is it pretty widespread? I mean, who are the victims of these attacks?
No one's safe. Almost every critical infrastructure sector has been targeted by ransomware. I think in the FBI we used to say we haven't really seen any against the dams sector, but otherwise every sector. And we see ransomware attacks from kind of small medical offices, and maybe they're ransoming them for $10,000, up through multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar companies that are in countries across the globe, and they're being extorted for tens of millions of dollars. So you really see these groups targeting anyone that they can find has a vulnerability. And what it looks like on the back end, and it depends on how they're going to go do it. And I could technically geek out all day long on all that stuff, but like say you have a vulnerability that you know how to exploit. Like you know how to get in because somebody hasn't patched a certain thing. Like, right? Your phone, your computer needs an update on Tuesday, you press update, that's doing all those patching.
Right.
But not everyone does that. So that's what a vulnerability is like that's in there. The actors will just scan across the internet to see who hasn't patched the vulnerability. They may not even know who the entity is that they're targeting. They're just going after who's susceptible.
They're vulnerable.
Exactly.
Okay. And people are paying. So talk a little bit about, from a victim's perspective, what's the choice that they're facing? Is the instances where companies are trying to resist going to authorities for protection or to get these groups investigated and thwarted? Is that on the rise, or are people paying at the same rate that they've always been paying?
No, actually, so some blockchain analysis companies, they monitor this, like how much Bitcoin is going to ransomware actors in a given year. And last year saw a 35% decrease from the year prior. A lot of factors go into that: law enforcement takedowns, better cybersecurity, but also a lack of willingness to pay as much as there was in the past. And it's a business decision to do that. It's the worst day in a company's lifetime to have to decide to pay criminals or not to get back online. But even if you pay, there's no guarantee you're going to get 100% back. We see decryptors, so that's the tool that the ransomware actors are supposed to send you after you pay to get your network back online. They work maybe...
So like the antidote to their malware.
Exactly. We see those work maybe like 2/3 of the time, or like decrypt about 2/3 of data. Sometimes they don't work at all. And we also, the ransomware groups have often tell victims, we'll delete your data if you pay. The FBI got into the back end of a lot of these groups. That data was not deleted. Either through laziness, right, or further exploitation. And then finally, if you pay, you're known as a company or organization that pays.
Yeah.
These affiliates that I talked about before, the ones who actually go do, they're a ransomware actor for not just one ransomware family. They might hit you again and again. And so there's a lot of downsides to paying, but sometimes people have no choice.
So you mentioned Bitcoin a second ago. So can you talk a little bit about the nexus with cryptocurrency? This is the form of payment that they often prefer, right?
Of course, yeah. So almost always you have to pay your ransom in a form of Bitcoin or Ethereum, some type of cryptocurrency. In fact, a lot of the more developed groups have help desks that will help a victim through figuring out how to get a wallet and pay them and go through that whole process, since not everybody knows how to do that. And they use that because it is easier to move money outside of the kind of traditional economy. Banks have checks. You can get the checks of checks and balances, right? You can claw money back oftentimes after a certain, within maybe 72 hours. If it goes through a traditional bank, you can see it move. There's a trail. With some of the cryptocurrency, yes, there's blockchain. Yes, there's a trail. But the laundering that can go on, and they split it up in wallet after wallet after wallet. They move it from various things. There's groups called mixers that like you put the money in, you mixes it with other money that's gone in, and it comes out on different wallets. So it makes it so you can try to hide how you're getting that money, and it helps people who are in countries who, maybe aren't connected as into a U.S. or Western financial system to also be able to get that money and get those proceeds out.
So what do companies like Halcyon do to help potential victims or actual victims? I know you run the Ransomware Research Center, which is an arm of Halcyon. What is that doing?
So the Research Center is a really fun adventure that Halcyon just created to be able to bring together the best intelligence about ransomware, but also think about solutions like smart policy options and try to gain partnerships along the way. So it's not just Halcyon's information, but it's a lot of different industries or governments or academic institutions coming together to pull together a more fulsome ransomware picture. And that's from the very advanced niche stuff that allows me as like a cyber threat analyst to get really excited about, but also the education component, like teaching people about ransomware, about the groups, and kind of everything in between, because there's only a small amount of us really care about that very, very detailed means by which a ransomware actor gets into a network. But there's a lot of people who care and need to know more about who is this group, who is this group, what does it mean when they're getting initial access, and kind of putting that all together. And of course, when we do all of this research, it goes back in to fuel Halcyon's effort to stop ransomware, where we're using AI, but I would call it old school AI, right? The stuff we know really works well. And we do behavioral threat detection. So we can look at it like behavior on a network and say, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't seem right. We need to look into that further. People have heard it called living off the land, where if you're in China context, they get onto a network, but then they use programs that are already there to hide who they are, make it look like normal traffic. Ransomware actors do that a lot as well. And so we're able to detect their behavior along the way. We're able to detect if they are taking data and moving it to send it out external to the network, to bad groups. And then finally, when you get to that end stage, we can actually stop an attack. We are able to capture the keys, so capture the information needed during an attack where the ransomware actors are encrypting a network. We can capture the information needed to be able to decrypt, to make the antidote in real time without companies having to actually pay.
And you're using AI to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, AI like neural networks, machine learning, and now we're starting to look at like how Gen AI plays a role in that as well.
And so is the best defense to have something on your network in advance that's sort of monitoring and looking out for ransomware or other types of attacks, or is it just standard intrusion detection system?
So groups are getting better. And we often see now that ransomware groups are figuring out ways to blind or tamper with or hide endpoint detection response. So like what you think of when you have your antivirus on your home network, or the larger kind of functions that can go onto an organization. And they're targeting them because they work. People should still have them. But what you need to have is defense, something called defense in depth. It means you shouldn't just have one solution, because one solution can fail. But if you put multiple solutions together, you have the behavioral detection along with the actual, malware detection and being able to identify the signatures of the bad guys, and you put all that together, the defense is almost certainly the cheapest option for organizations who, if you know you're going to be targeted, if you know no one's safe, and the option on the other end is just millions and millions of dollars, but also downtime, also losing reputation, losing clients, that's the best way to protect yourself from that.
So how do we think about this, again, from the perspective of a potential client? I mean, yes, if you're a large bank or an electric power company, coupled with a lot of vulnerability potentially, but also a lot of resources, building a defense in depth is reasonable and achievable. But if you're a small doctor's office or a small utility in some rural area of the country, is it still wise to pursue this sort of thing? Is it affordable to do it?
So it's surprisingly affordable because oftentimes the price is based on how many devices, we call it endpoints, right? Like you might have on your network. So it is surprisingly affordable. But the basics also matter a lot there, where the most advanced ransomware groups probably aren't targeting the smaller organizations that can't pay a lot.
Okay.
So where they're being targeted is oftentimes through easy to guess passwords or not having the multi-factor authentication. So, you get your text message, you do this.
Stuff.
The standard stuff, patch, when it says to update your computer, update. Doing that standard stuff would still stop the majority of cyber attacks. And you just kind of have to look at your risk calculus. What I would say on the small and medium businesses, though, is oftentimes they have less cash on hand. So they can't weather 22 days of downtime. It means they might close.
Right.
There's been reports of rural hospitals that have closed because of a ransomware attack. Think about the implications for an entire community.
Yeah, that could be devastating.
Devastating and likely leading to deaths.
Mm-hmm. So, drawing on your experience at the Bureau and the intelligence community and the law enforcement community, and now private sector, what do you see as kind of the emerging partnership between private sector companies, the government, the intelligence community, maybe academia, and other private citizens, right? So how can this be working more effectively to protect us against ransomware and other threats?
So I'm incredibly proud of the work that we'd already done. Like when I was at the FBI, when I started doing cyber, FBI would write a product and we'd put it out to net defenders. And then maybe DHS would write a very similar product. They'd put it out to net defenders, and maybe NSA wanted to do something, right? And they'd put it out. And like it's a little mind-boggling now to think that we weren't doing this all together.
Okay.
And so, while I was there, I had the opportunity to oversee us bringing it together. Now we have joint advisories, talking more across each other. And not only is it less confusing for net defenders, it's just better information because everyone worked together. And the work that's been done on the CISA side to increase the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, their JCDC, to bring industry together. If you look at the back of a lot of these advisories, you see thanks to, and it has a bunch of companies there.
Okay. And
it means that those companies got a pre-look. They gave information into these advisories. And so all of that's working. But wow, we need to do a lot more of it. And we need to do it faster. I think academia plays a big role in the push out to state and locals that's going on right now from the federal government. Universities, colleges, they're in our towns. And, being able to have them think about ways to partner with the local communities on cybersecurity, I think it trains students better and helps out those local communities. So I'd love to see more on that. And I've talked to a few universities on that area. And for private industry, especially when we're in a shutdown now, more people are at home that are in the government. Like, it's important for private industry to step up, share across each other, figure out our balance between competitive forces and collaborative forces. And those are always going to be there. But there's a baseline that we can all do the right thing on. And the cyber industry is really made up of people who want to counter the adversary. They want to stop bad things from happening. So there's a lot of interest in doing that, and we all need to band together even more, I think, when we're having the slowing down of some of the information or activities that are going on in the government today.
You talked about some of the AI innovations that you're saying. So innovation for defense, I presume a lot of that is happening in private sector companies, right? Not necessarily government?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that? And is there some sharing of those capabilities, or is it sort of a vendor relationship with government? How does that work?
I'm actually very worried about this. I think that the industry overall, and it's not just cyber industry, it's across the board private sector, is integrating AI. And there, even from a year ago to today, so much more excitement about how They are going to integrate what they can do, like how they'll use AI, the advances in Gen AI moving forward. In the government, it's not a lack of kind of technical know-how, and there is pockets where it's being integrated, and I think DoD is probably doing one of the better jobs at that. But institutional barriers, the slowness with which people are evaluating, I'm afraid that gulf gets wider and wider and wider. And a lot of the frontier models that are in companies that are going out, they've offered a lot of their services, I believe, for a very low cost to the government. But it's about figuring out the institutional hurdles internal. It's, I think, a lot less on the cost side. But I know the tools that I have today in the industry would have really helped my folks.
Oh, that's telling.
At the FBI. And it's tough. It's tough to see that difference. At the FBI, we only had enough resources to really do, we would call them tier 2 or tier 1 type threats, and we could tier them till 5, but which didn't have
the resources at the time.
But as I'm building an AI native team today, as I get to bring on analysts and see them use AI resources from the beginning, and it makes them super analysts. They can just do so much more.
But I'm sure the way that you structure your organization is different than the way it's done in government, because they have access to AI and these tools right now. Policy question for you.
Yeah.
So just this month, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015 was allowed to expire. How important was that act, and what should Congress be thinking about doing with it next?
That act was critical, and it's critical in ways I think people take for granted now, that it's been in place for a decade. So the type of sharing that we have between industry and government and industry to industry is all predicated on this law and the liability protections, antitrust protections that were included. When we let it expire, I've heard from outside counsels, so lawyers that are helping victims through a breach, they say they have to change their conversation about how much risk there is in sharing with the government, with their clients. And that change in risk is like you have a lot more if you share. Industry to industry, there were antitrust protections in there for our sharing. Now, I think that's probably less in peril than some of the other. There's less concern there overall, but it still could happen. And so what you really have right now is you have certain companies, both in AI companies, cyber security companies, and victims sharing less with the government than they were previously. Companies like Halcyon, there's other cyber companies that have come out and said, we're going to continue sharing exactly the way we did before, with the good faith that there are efforts to get this back, to bring this back. And I know I signed on a letter of support for legislation last week that was starting to move through from the Senate side. I've been supportive of House Homeland's efforts to get this over the finish line as well. Anything we can do to ensure people aren't worried or nervous that they're going to be liable if they share with the government is better, because if the government doesn't know about something, they can't warn others.
Yeah, it seems like it was an essential tool in the toolkit. Well, finally, I'd like to ask a question I ask a lot of my guests. So I teach a graduate school course at Texas A&M's Bush School, course on cybersecurity. So what is one, possibly two pieces of advice that you would give a young person looking to join the U.S. government, U.S. intelligence community, law enforcement community to help with the cyber fight?
I used to sit down with a lot of college students and talk through what a career in government would look like and a career in the private sector would look like for them. And my advice was always, there's nothing wrong with making a difference in your 20s and money in your 30s and 40s if that's what you want to do. You'll almost certainly make more money if you go to the private sector right after college. But if you invest in yourself, you go into government and you are getting to fight the baddest of the bad guys. You get access to really interesting tools and information. You have access to incredibly generous training benefits and education benefits. I mean, the government paid for 2 masters for me.
Pretty good deal, right?
It's a pretty good deal. It is a great deal. And like, there's tons of different cyber trainings that you may not have access to or have more limited access to in private industry. So there's a lot of benefits, and then you make that investment in yourself. You end up worth more in the private sector too when you decide to make that jump later. But no one can ever take away from you the great work you did. Like, there's nothing more fun than being part of a takedown operation where you stopped that cyber campaign, those cyber actors. And even if it was for 4 months, you stopped them. That's 4 months of relief for U.S. victims.
Yeah.
It's a real deal. So my advice is go for it. But if you want kind of practical, what do you need to do to get in? It's, continue applying. Having internships really does help, like in various areas. But ultimately, if you are in this economy, it's going to be so hard to figure out. Like, I have teenagers, and they say, "What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to even major in college in the age of AI?" And my answer is, it's whatever you're passionate about, right? Curiosity,
Good advice.
Curiosity, passion, like that's gonna surpass any kind of minute changes to the workforce that we might see, like as AI comes up, and that's what the government's looking for as well.
Well, Cynthia Kaiser, Senior Vice President with Halcyon, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
All right.